Hey everyone, we're going to talk about fine-tuning versus vector database context. And basically, a few weeks ago, I posted a video about how fine-tuning works and how you can take your large language model and fine-tune it to your needs so that when somebody asks a question, it can answer a question about your business. So that was a pretty complicated way of, it showed a pretty complex way of taking your data, turning it into question and answers, sharing it with the large language model, and doing a few steps of reinforcement learning. So that was called RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback, where you take a base model, and then fine-tune it, supervised fine-tuning, and then you put it through another scoring mechanism and put it through reinforcement learning, and then you get a final model. And this is very expensive and hard to do because you got to figure out how to clean up the data, get it labeled, and then scored. So lots of steps: clean up, label, score, and these are all manual steps that will take a lot of work. And obviously, lots of companies have done it. GPT 3.5 and 4 are based on some version of this. 4 actually has some more complexity as was leaked recently. However, there's a simpler version of doing this that also exists, but very few people are actually doing this. So let's just share, like, if that's not even really accessible by most folks today. What most folks are doing today is building context with your data. What do I mean by that? So what I mean by that is, consider a large language model, GPT 3.5, for example. So today we give it a prompt, which can only be 4,000 words or so. Well, there's some bigger ones like 16 and 32K words, and it will give you back an answer. And the way that a lot of the framework that's been useful is that you give it a prompt that already has a context. So for example, if I am selling t-shirts and I want to provide a customer service app that answers questions about my t-shirts, what I'm going to do is before I build this final prompt, I'm going to have a pre-prompt. Question gets asked. I look through my database and find all of the relevant times a similar question was asked, build a new prompt, and then feed that in here, which is still within that limited window, and then I get an answer. Now this works well, but there are several complications that we haven't talked about. There is a package called LangChain, super popular in the last 1 year. Started off as an open source project. Now they have a company, and actually is really useful to get folks up and running. So we tested this. What we did was we took our data set was last 3 years of sales call transcripts, and we tried to put it into a database, and we chose for this Pinecone. Now, when we did this, all it did was it took small sentences from these transcripts and cut them into pieces of 600 words per chunk. And it kept a mapping of those words and the mathematical representation of these words. And everything was shipped over to Pinecone in these little chunks, such that anytime a new query would come, it would find as many relevant chunks as I could find, and give me not only the query, but, like, let's say the top 3 relevant chunks. Now, here's the problem with this, right? So imagine I had a call that was not 600 words, but 6,000 words, and somewhere in the sentence, later in the sentence, closer to 4,000 words, I'm talking about the depth of a topic. That stuff gets completely missed. So for example, for most sales calls, you start with intro, some context setting, demo, Q&A. So let's say this is stored in the first 600 words. This is the next 1,200. This is the next 1,800, so on and so forth. Now, in the intro, we're introducing our company. If I ask the query, what does my company do? Often it will find all of the intros from different sales calls and tries to answer a question. But if the question is complicated, where it says, hey, what does this company do, and what does feature A look like, then it becomes really complicated because it has to pull from multiple places. It doesn't know what the right context is, and since I'm limiting it to a certain number of relevant conversations from the past, it doesn't have the ability to go deep. And this is what makes this LangChain type approach, in my mind, fundamentally flawed, where it looks really good on the first try, but the moment you start to go deeper and try to ask it some deeper questions, the ability of, like, the limitation of these small chunk sizes and the ability of and the small number of relevant conversations becomes really, really heavy and hard to build, hard to make the language model meaningfully useful. Okay, so that's if you can do that, what are some of our other options? So the other option is fine tuning. So the reason I'm making this video today is OpenAI just launched GPT 3.5 Turbo fine tuning, and I really like their fine tuning approach because what they're doing is they're saying bring your fine tuning data, which means a data set which really is a simple table of questions and answers. So as many questions and answers as you can find. Ideally, you don't need a super large number, like a few hundred questions and answers are probably fine. And you populate this type of table, feed it to OpenAI, and out will come your model. And now you can do the Q&A, and it should be able to do a lot of the answers. Now, the other interesting thing about the GPT version of it is they also have a system prompt, which means that enables you to tell the AI model who you are. So now let's summarize this. You have a training data set, a bunch of Q&A, and I will say that this is by far going to become the hardest part. How do you take your existing data, sales transcripts, customer service transcripts, or even have your team do the labeling or hire an external party to do the labeling, but come up with a lot of like high quality cute questions and answers? That's number one. Find the data. Second, design your prompt. And this is through that system message. And what I mean by this is tell it who it is. So in my case, I would tell it, I am a B2B SaaS platform that provides AI predictions, and then you set up a Q&A or type chat completion. So in summary, there are several ways of approaching LLM customization, RLHF being the hardest but probably the most fruitful, followed by this type of fine tuning, which is now available. Didn't used to be available, requires a lot of data munging, but this is probably the best way to go about it. And my least favorite way is this LangChain based approach. Now, the thing about LangChain is I still recommend you start with this because literally this is 7 to 12 lines of code and doesn't even require a lot of coding if anybody wants to get started. All right, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you.